His broadcasters, and for everyone, there must be a beginning. For Jack Morris, it came at the age of 14 at radio station WMBH in Joplin, Missouri. From there, he could reach for the stars.
Well, I'd had enough background in Joplin, Missouri, starting out there delivering advertising copy. And so I was with a radio station from early on and got into the nucleus and operation of a radio station. And then when my voice changed, I was in radio. And after school, I'd come in and announce. And so I had the background and some experience. And so I would say that the transition from that to what we called the big time at that time into Tulsa, and Tulsa radio was a fairly easy step for me.
But before he could fully realize that first big step, Uncle Sam had a job of his own for Jack, a job involving World War II, helping to establish the Armed Forces Radio Network. But in 1944, he was back at KTUL Radio.
I was an announcer, just doing commercials for the station, KTUL, and when I went to the service after about a 3-year stint in the service, when I came back, Glenn Condon, you may remember him, of course, he got me interested in the news business, and he wouldn't let me on the air doing news until I got some footwork in, and he assigned me some beats at the courthouse and City Hall, and gave me a pad and pencil and told me to start taking copious notes and then come back and write what I had heard, and then after doing that for quite some time, he decided that maybe he ought to give me a try.
And to this day, Jack considers Glenn Condon to have been his mentor and still speaks of him with great reverence.
He was such a great newsman. I mean, his background dates back to the days of Walter Winchell in New York, and that's where he got his start. He was assisting Walter Winchell, and then when he came to Tulsa, he had his background with the Tulsa World as a managing editor, and for quite a long time he did radio news in Tulsa, and gosh, news was his baby, and I think he was a great teacher. He was a great teacher and provided the kind of things that I needed to know, the background and how to go about it, the nuts and bolts of news gathering and reporting. I think I attribute a lot of whatever I know about it to Glenn Condon.
And so his career in Tulsa radio was launched, and he felt good about it.
As I say, I had already been on the air as an announcer, and with the background that Glenn Condon gave me in gathering the news and feeling confident with what I had seen and what I was writing about, I felt confident in reporting it, so yes.
Then came the switch to television in 1954, moving over to KTUL TV, and he will tell you it was not as easy as it may have looked.
Well, it took a bit of doing, to be very frank. Cameras just scared me to death after just talking into a microphone, and it took a while to get used to that with the lights and the tension that come with television. But after a while, I began getting comfortable with it, and I got to the point eventually that I was as comfortable in front of the camera doing news as I was with just a microphone and no one around, When KTUL got into the television business, the license was not assigned to Tulsa. It was a Muskogee station, as you know, and so I commuted between Tulsa and Muskogee for some 18 months until they got their Tulsa studios. And we went on the air in 1954, and I was there for some 18 months before they put the studio into Tulsa, and I was happy about that.
He was also happy with his teammates, Hal O'Halloran and Don Woods, his sports and weather sidekicks. Together, they would become the city's most successful team.
Yeah, we worked together as a team, and And in those days, as you well know, Jerry, news business was not like it is today. There's a little more flair to news presentation than in those days. There wasn't an awful lot of chit-chat. We were just dead serious about the news and weather and sports, and it wasn't quite as lighthearted as it is today. And of course, as we all know, this is apparently what the public likes today, or you all wouldn't be doing it. But in the early days of news reporting, I mean, we were just dead serious. We knew that you had a certain amount of time to get the news in, and counting commercial time, and you just had to get on with it and not do an awful lot of chit-chat.
And while successfully anchoring 2 primetime newscasts a day, Jack and his staff were also turning out highly acclaimed hour-long documentaries, often traveling to remote locations.
A lot of traveling, a lot of research. We went to Europe and the Middle East even to do some specials, and that was a lot of fun. That was the romantic part of the news business that I enjoyed quite a lot.
And the special on Israel was particularly timely.
We were in there shortly after the Six-Day War, and we had a lot of problems trying to do what we wanted to do, but we had some help from some prominent Tulsa people who had already made some contacts for us in advance, and we got in. We were fortunate enough to get an interview, a rare interview, with then Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion, and we talked to Abba Eban, who was the general in the war, and a lot of those Israeli leaders, and we had, in fact, we did a lot of the things that the networks hadn't done, and it was just absolutely great.
Jack moved to Channel 2 in Tulsa in 1970, where his daily commentaries would become legendary and add an important ingredient to his success.
It really was, and at the time I started doing that, we had a very good subject that immediately got the attention of most people, and that was Watergate. And if you recall, at the time I took the position, and very early on I took the position that the liberal press was after President Nixon and mistreated him, and I think they overdid it in so many areas, and those are the kind of things I talked about. Well, apparently I was in the minority with that point of view, and that got people to listening. And this went on for quite some time, and I think I supported President Nixon a little too long, but I felt, and I think that was my downfall, but I really felt at the time that there was an awful lot of things that were negative towards the president, that before the total facts were out, they had already hung him, and I just thought that was unfair at the time. Of course, as we all know, it turned out the thing that I thought would never happen did, and more or less the smoking gun, and that's the way things went. But yes, that was one of the I think very key elements in getting involved in commentary, to get some immediate attention that we were actually involved in commentary, is when we chose the subject of the president's demise and the events leading up to that. But we had an awful lot of other commentaries and with various topics to discuss, and a lot of it contributed by viewers, and as a result, we got the Freedom Foundation Award in Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, because we did talk about Americanism and the ideals and principles of democracy and the freedoms and the things that we enjoy here, and we talked about the need for vigilance in the Congress, and various topics that are mostly conservative views, and people in this part of the country, as we all know, were highly interested in that, and I think that helped us through that particular period. I think we did commentaries for about 7 or 8 years or so.
And those daily commentaries often stretched his workday into 12 or 14-hour lengths.
I remember during my tenure in broadcasting, people would say, gosh, you have an easy job. You just come in and do your 6 o'clock news. You come in around, what, about 4 or 5 o'clock, and then you do the 10 o'clock, and you come back in about 9 or so, and so that's right. Would you believe 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning, to get it ready.
Jack has seen many changes in his profession and finds the magnitude of those changes remarkable.
The tool that we had in radio was a simple microphone and a desk and a chair, and then the transition to television and to television news reporting. And even in those days, we had 16-millimeter film and Oricon cameras, and you had to have your own film processor if you were going to be competitive. And our news people would go out and gather the news and come in. If they didn't come in, if we had a 6 o'clock newscast and they weren't in by 3 or 4 o'clock, there was no chance to get any video on the air whatsoever, because it took an hour and a half to 2 hours to process film. Well, today we've got the instant video, we've got live shots, and we've got the instant video for people. I mean, that's the technological changes, I think, that have been made in the last few years that just have changed the way of covering a news story and reporting it completely different than what we were doing in those days.
And this newest Broadcast Hall of Famer has the most basic formula for success for anyone wishing to follow in his footsteps.
Get involved in writing and in reporting and get down to the basics first, and get some experience, early on, even if it's in a small place like Joplin, for example, and get that early experience, and then get into what I called the big time at that time, graduating from one little station to another, and then putting everything you have into it. And most of all, you have to like what you're doing. I mean, I think people who are not successful do not like what they're doing. And I think that's so important. You have to like what you're doing, to be excited about it, and to put all your energies into it and go after it.
And you liked what you
And I loved what I was doing. Not liked it, I loved it.
And perhaps the most telling item about this extraordinary journalist, he wouldn't change a thing.
As I look back on it, I think that I felt that I was prepared. And I think if you're prepared, I think the opportunities come your way.
And good things have continued to happen to Jack Morris since leaving broadcasting. He has spent the last 10 years with the Nordam Corporation in Tulsa, and just a couple of weeks ago at the company picnic, tonight's honoree was recognized by Chairman and CEO Ray Siegfried.
Jack has been honored by the Oklahoma Broadcasters Association, and it gives me great pleasure to announce that he is being inducted into the Oklahoma Broadcasters Association Hall of Fame, July the 13th, 1991.
For Jack and his wife Dorothy, it has been a wonderful ride. He has traveled the world. He has met the great and the near great and never lost his perspective nor his journalistic integrity. Along the way, the honors have been many, capped tonight by the ultimate recognition for an Oklahoma journalist. A remarkable man is Jack Morris, reporter, commentator, Oklahoma legend.